Our next speaker is Emily Strand on Harry, Gawain, Green Knights, and Goblets. The speaker is Emily and not the lawnmower outside.
I'm not scared of that lawnmower. Okay. Hi. Hello, hello. Let's see if we can get this to work here. Okay. Well, this is my 10th consecutive year. Thank you. I feel like I want to applaud that as well. 10th consecutive year presenting at this wonderful conference. And as many of you know, with Dr. Katie McDaniel of Marietta College, who just came in, we co-host Potterverse, an academic Harry Potter studies podcast. Laurie is our producer, and yes, Potterversity. It's not Potterversary, although that's maybe a different podcast. And you know, I mean, Chestnut Hill is so special to us because, you know, we are here with many of our guests also, past, present, and future. So we really value the connections that we've made here at Chestnut Hill, and many of our episodes are based on those connections and those conversations. And so I just want to say thanks once again to Karen and Patrick and Laurie and Hannah and Lauren and the whole team who put this together. So thank you very much. Scholars have noticed and articulated the many parallels between the Harry Potter books and chivalric romance, especially the 14th century poem, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which J.R.R. Tolkien called one of the masterpieces of 14th century art in England and of English literature as a whole. Let me provide a short synopsis for those who don't know the poem, and as Dumbledore said, to preface his explanation of the Triwizard Tournament, I hope those who do know will forgive me and allow their attention to wander freely. In Gawain, Arthur's court is assembled for Christmas festivities when they are interrupted by the appearance of an uncanny green knight on horseback, bearing an axe and a holly branch, who laughingly challenges one of Arthur's men to give him a blow with the axe, with the agreement that the Green Knight will return the blow later. When no one else comes forward, Sir Gawain answers this Christmas challenge, severing the knight's head in one blow, some strategery on Gawain's part. But in a grotesquely magical turn, the knight picks up his severed head and admonishes Gawain that he will receive a blow from him in turn in the Green Chapel in a year and a day. And then he leaves. And then he departs. Gawain waits around until after the Halloween feast of the next year, and then he leaves to find the Green Chapel. He faces challenges along the way, like animals and rough living, and on Christmas Eve, pious Gawain prays for an opportunity to hear Holy Mass for Christmas. A shimmering castle appears with the sacramental opportunities he desires, as well as gracious hosts to welcome him, Sir Bertilac and his beautiful wife, plus some other folks, including an old ugly crone lurking about. Gawain gets into more games with his host and faces temptation from the beautiful wife, temptation of the usual kind, you know, sex and jewelry, but also in the form of a magic girdle that she says will protect him from death. This he cannot resist, given what awaits him after Christmas. So instead of handing the gift over to his host, Bertilac, per their game, he secretly wears it as he departs to find the Green Chapel, which is just a clearing in the woods near the castle. There, flinchy in his abject terror, Gawain meets the Green Knight, who takes not one but 3 swings at Gawain's neck, but none really lands. The third gives him a little bloody nick, and the Green Knight laughingly reveals himself to be Gawain's avuncular host, Sir Bertilac, whom the witch Morgan Le Fay, the old crone, has magically transformed into the Green Knight both last Christmas and this Christmas as a project meant to scare the court, especially Guinevere. In fact, Morgan hopes to frighten Arthur's queen to death. Gawain goes forth not much worse for the adventure, but disappointed in himself for his cowardice. So he sports the green and gold girdle from thenceforth as a sign of his shame. When he returns to Camelot, his fellow knights of the Round Table decide to wear similar sashes in solidarity with him. Okay, for those who allowed their attentions to wander freely, please wander back because we are done with the synopsis. Okay. Does that a little bit? Does that just making sure it wasn't just me? Gawain and Potter are both stories, and spirit of the hero lies at the core of an exciting magical adventure story. In Literary Allusion in Harry Potter, Oxford scholar Beatrice Groves says of Harry and Gawain, both heroes pass through trials that teach them surprising truths about friends, enemies, and themselves as they grow from naivety to self-awareness. Groves makes a compelling case that both Book 2, Chamber of Secrets, and Book 7, Deathly Hallows, draw deeply from the Gawain narrative. She highlights key elements of the Potter texts that the Potter texts and Gawain share, including the centrality of powerful magical objects like the green and gold girdle Gawain somewhat cheatingly wears in his final face-off with the Green Knight. Such mythic medieval objects, Grove says, hold a sway over Rowling's imagination. From the 7 cursed diamonds of her first long story, written when she was 11, to the 7 Horcruxes, 4 Hogwarts Founders objects, and 3 Deathly Hallows. Grove's observations about the Gawain Deathly Hallows parallels focus on the temptation that both heroes experience in facing death without resorting to the aid of magical talismans. A test Gawain fails, but Harry passes, while both heroes stand in a forest clearing to face their darkly mysterious foes. But Groves says that the 14th century poem also echoes throughout Book 2, Chamber of Secrets, thanks in part to beheading motifs in both stories, in which ghostly characters on horseback speak disconcertingly from their severed heads. She draws a clever parallel between the Nick given to Gawain in his final confrontation with the Green Knight and nearly headless Nick, whose name points to another beheading gone wrong, a happy outcome for Gawain, if not for Nick, which also adds humor to that, right? You'd be happy if a beheading didn't work out, but somehow he's not. Groves also points out that a woman named Guinevere, or Ginevra, Ginny's full name, turns out rather surprisingly to be crucial to the plot. And both women's justified terror at the unfolding situation is downplayed and ignored by the immature men of the storyscape. Both women end up targets of the malevolent forces at work behind the scenes. In Gawain, Morgan Le Fay; in Chamber, Voldemort, acting through his Horcrux, the diary riddle. Groves also points out many minor features both stories share, like the importance of Christmas to the story's unfolding and hero's growth, and the significance of holly as manifestation of this. Both stories, Groves says, also feature magical identity transformation in the hero's case via Polyjuice Potion. Laurie Beckhoff, writing in our Potterversity book, looks at Gawain's influence on Harry Potter from another thematic angle, games. Laurie notes how games in Potter toe the line, as they do in Arthurian literature, between gravity and amusement. You trust Laurie to use the phrase toe the line correctly. Most people don't, including me sometimes. Adding to Grove's observations on the heroic parallels between Potter and the Gawain poem, Becca, I can't call you Becca, I'm just going to call you Laurie. Laurie says games specifically offer important challenges and texts through which the heroes develop emotionally and psychologically, observing that, quote, Harry and Gawain's psyches are molded by games just as much as their skills and reputations are, end quote. And these challenges are no joke. In both Potter and chivalric romance, like Gawain, Laurie says games blend entertainment, competition, and mortal peril with serious injury and even death as acceptable risks of entering the competition. Laurie's observations on games in Potter and the similarities to games in chivalric romances got me thinking about another challenge game in Harry Potter, really the most significant of the saga. Because the last time I read Gawain from start to finish, I couldn't help but get serious Goblet vibes. While both Laurie and B. Groves observe parallels between Goblet and Gawain, Laurie's have to do with the treatment and function of games, and B's have to do with Goblet's significant internal allusions to Gawain. I hope to add to what they've both said by suggesting some significant overarching narrative parallels between Goblet and Gawain that narratively speaking, Goblet might well be the Gawainiest installment of an already very Gawainy saga. So first and foremost, the plot of both stories is predicated on a bizarre and dangerous yet ambivalent game. In Goblet, the game danger mix, a mark of chivalric games, begins right away with the Quidditch World Cup. Not only with the match itself, but especially with the bizarre terrorist attack by Death Eaters that mars its aftermath. Then quickly, Harry learns Hogwarts will host the Triwizard Tournament, the nature of which seems as ambivalent as the beheading game proposed by the Green Knight, who, though he threatens death, frames himself as the merriest man alive and his violent challenge as a Christmas game. Arthur and Gawain actually grin and laugh as he departs, head in hand. Similarly, the Great Hall is filled with excitement as Dumbledore announces the tournament, even as he mentions the death toll historically associated with it. Only Hermione, like Guinevere, seems particularly sensitive to the perilous aspects of the situation. In both stories, everyone around these women goes along willingly and with great interest in the deadly game that is proposed. And in each story, entering the game as a champion magically binds the hero, powerfully if vaguely, to the challenge, however dangerous or even life-threatening it may become. The reader is expected to respect this magically binding commitment made by both Gawain and Harry, even when in both stories, we'd really just like them to quit. Like, why do you have to go through with this? What is this, come on. It's like when my son is like shouting, game, I'm always like, it's not fun, don't play it. The students learn about the tournament at the open feast, but the game gets going in earnest after the champions are selected at Halloween, which is also when Gawain departs to find the Green Chapel. And of course, Harry is mysteriously one of these champions. B. Groves describes Gawain in the poem as, quote, one of the youngest and least experienced of the knights. And this is also true of Harry, who, despite not meeting the age threshold, has been entered maliciously in the contest through the scheming of his enemies. Gawain's only calling card is that he's Arthur's nephew. Similarly, Harry has the whole boy who lived reputation to stand on, despite his youth. In both cases, the enemy behind it all is using the inexperienced champion to land blows in a larger conflict. Now that he's a champion, Harry starts to feel a lot more like Hermione about the tournament. Despite feeling a bit like he's cheating, he accepts help from Hermione, Hagrid, Moody, Cedric, Dobby, really anyone who will help him. For, as fake Moody tells him, cheating is a traditional part of the Triwizard Tournament and always has been. A similar dilemma faces Gawain, who is caught between courtly expectations of both courtesy to both his hosts, right, and honor, not to mention his own personal piety, both of which rule out sleeping with married women, however they may plead. But Gawain caves to temptation when it comes to accepting assistance that might save his life in form of the golden and green girdle. Like Harry, who must also suppress his conscience at accepting help, he's just trying to survive the game. Another important similarity between how Gawain and Harry play the game is their deadly seriousness about it, despite those around them treating it like, well, a game. Laurie notes that Gawain, by the time he's at Bertilac's castle, takes his task in deadly earnest, in contrast to those around him who urge him to stay on, enjoy himself, enjoy the holiday. Harry's similar stance to the Triwizard Tournament is most clearly manifested in his attempt to save all the hostages of the merpeople during the second task, instead of just his own, not realizing that they would survive either way. In both stories, readers keenly feel the tension between what the situation seems to warrant and frustration that the hero's fears are not being taken more seriously. Another similarity to Gawain shapes Goblet narratively, the insertion of romance in the story. This may have been commonplace for chivalric stories, but as Bill Ward pointed out yesterday, with Goblet, it is a new feature in Potter, a very developmentally appropriate one, and it is further evidence of Goblet's strong, narratively elusive relationship with the Gawain poem, indeed perhaps the strongest of the 7 books. As Gawain is getting seduced by, we'll call her Mrs. Bertilac, Harry is having romantic feelings of his own for the first time in the series, And they're complicated in a similar way to Gawain's by the fact that the object of his feelings, Cho Chang, is unavailable. Further, Cho is spoken for by Cedric, the other Hogwarts champion, with whom Harry is both allied and in direct competition. This is very similar to the complex relationship Gawain has with Bertilac, the husband, who is both his honored host, who has given him aid in his quest, and also his direct competitor as the Green Knight, even if Gawain is unaware of this dual identity. So what's new for me in thinking about all this, and what Bill pointed out so wisely, is that bathroom scene is this super icky, scene of sexual temptation. Maybe Harry's not tempted, but he's clearly being seduced by this woman in this very inappropriate, and it's very borderline magical, like something magical is going on here. And so while I wasn't thinking about that because I was thinking about Cho as kind of the object of his affection, but now that you mention that bathroom scene, that's really a great manifestation of this insertion of this idea of sexual love into the story world. And so if I take this any further, I'll definitely be citing you, Bill, on that, because that's just a great spot. Though different in details and intensity, the strained romantic elements of both stories invite comparison in that they function to flesh out the challenge at hand and spur each hero's growth. Significantly, in each story, the hero faces tasks that come in threes. For Gawain, the three swings of the knight's axe come at the very end of the story, but throughout the story itself, his challenges can be grouped as part one of the initial challenge of the Green Knight, the quest for the Green Chapel, the seduction gifts game with the Bertilacs, and then part two of the Green Knight's challenge. So 3 tasks with the Green Knights being split into bookends. For Harry, the 3 tasks of the Triwizard Tournament are spread throughout the academic year and lend structure to the story as a whole, but he also faces 3 distinctive challenges in this book. The Triwizard Tournament as it appears on the surface, the threat of whoever put his name into the Goblet of Fire, and then complications from his interpersonal entanglements, especially with Cho, but also with Ron, really. In the end, both heroes face foes who are shapeshifters, who have been put up by the real enemy, a darkly powerful, magical figure well known to them. For Harry, this is Fake Moody, who is really Death Eater Barty Crouch Jr., acting for Voldemort. For Gawain, it is the Green Knight, who is really Sir Bertilac, acting for Morgan Le Fay. In case you're not yet convinced that Goblet is the Gawainiest of the Potter books, I have one more distinctive allusion to share. B. Groves notes in the Wizarding World, the First Class Order of Merlin is, according to a 2015 Pottermore writing by Rowling, a handsome golden medal on a green ribbon. And B speculates it alludes to the green and gold girdle that Gawain wears perpetually as a mark of his shame, but that his fellow knights decide to adopt in solidarity with him, transforming it into a badge of honor. Badges, who wears them, and how they show support for the hero is a humorous and effective subplot in Goblet, with Draco making the Support Cedric Potter Stinks transformative badges, increasing Harry's shame and anxiety at having been forced into the competition as a second Hogwarts champion. These badges might be only a humorous subplot in Goblet, but we must remember how one of these badges reappears in Deathly Hallows at the bottom of Harry's school trunk, flickering feebly as a flash reminder of how far he has come in his heroic quest. He has indeed become the only and true Hogwarts champion. Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire shares a surprising number of significant narrative features with Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Observing and articulating these commonalities adds to what scholars have already said about the importance of this 14th century treasure to the Harry Potter series. It also helps us appreciate Potter as a variously elusive saga, which connects to great works of literature like Gawain in the details that ornament the story, in important elements like games and magical objects, and even in its deepest narrative structures. Thank you very much.